And welcome back, folks, to Truth versus News, your first Truth versus Official Facts, Truth versus News here on President's Day, February 17th. We're really happy to have 45 presidents, and we'll see what's going to happen with 46 coming up here. So go ahead, Jim, lead on.
Thanks, Don. We were discussing the fact that the four-person of the jury that convicted Roger Stone was an anti-Trump, a rabid anti-Trump partisan which he concealed during jury selection, and where the judge ought to have voided the trial and insist there be a retrial with more attention paid to the selection of the jurors. Here she is, sharing a post with CNN on Wednesday in support of four prosecutors who resigned after the Attorney General moved to reduce the sentence recommendation, which appeared to have been grossly an exaggeration, 7 to 9 years, for what was basically an intellectual, a nonviolent crime when rapists get on the average 4.5. I mean, it was an absurd sentence. She says, I want to stand up for Aaron Zelinsky, Adam Jed, Michael Mirando, and Jonathan Kravis, the prosecutors on the Roger Stone trial, she wrote. It pains me to see the DOJ now interfere with the hard work of the prosecutors. They acted with the utmost intelligence, integrity, and respect for a system of justice as though she were in a position to make those judgments. Trump has been supportive of Stone while publicly slamming the judge. And is this the judge who put Paul Manafort in solitary confinement? Something not even monster Al Capone had to endure? How did she treat crooked Hillary Clinton? Just ask.
Yeah. Oh.
Trump tweeted to his more than 72 million followers on Tuesday. That's a pretty good list. I got 3,000 followers. Trump has 72 million.
Yeah.
Scott, I want to get your comments on this. This is a big deal. I agree.
It is, and as you were talking, Jim, my mind kind of thought of something. It's what happened when you add the Fetzer gunpowder to the Bennett cordite, I suppose. But why isn't every American jurist demanded to make an oath to the Constitution and swear an oath to the Constitution?
That's right.
Why does that not happen? And if it doesn't, we are a failure as a society, and Trump should remedy that with an executive order that says every single juror should swear an oath to the United States Constitution. I had to do it in the military. I had to do it in the federal government. The juries are participating in the third branch of the United States government. It is a shame that we don't have them swear that kind of an oath. And if they violate that oath by clearly political animus, they should be prosecuted for it. You're entering into a sacred duty. If you can't handle it, if you can't be above board and with equilibrium, then you are gone. And for this revelation of the political animus revealed in the tweets by the jurist, the lady, and the judge, she should be impeached. Why don't they say that as well? I read a good book on impeachment. It's called Impeachment. I can't remember the author's name, but it talked about the impeaching of judges. Trump and Napolitano and these people should say, not only should Roger Stone get a new trial because of all the revelations, not only should the prosecutors be disbarred if they had political leanings and participation with the Robert Mueller investigation, but the judge should be impeached because she clearly abused her position in the courts of the United States government, and judges swear an oath to the Constitution. She violated her oath by waging political war, a coup d'etat, subterfuge, treason against the United States president. So the judge should be impeached. These four prosecutors through the Department of Justice, participation with the Mueller, probe and all of that needs to be brought to bear. The Department of Justice and the FBI and the law enforcement branch of the United States government and state government is what is going to trigger, I think, a large blow up, if not civil war revolution in this country, because of their hostility to the American people. No one likes to see people in SWAT uniforms with black helmets and goggles and with camouflage uniforms that say police and armed personnel carriers treating the public like they are, enemies, combatants in war. This is our country. The police and the law enforcement community and the military exist at our pleasure. They exist to perform the protective functions of the people, the citizenry of this country, and not to abuse and to bleed them with every fine and false prosecutions. And this is where the police state has carried us. It is heartening to see there's a lot of videos coming out of people photographing the military, photographing the police and the FBI on their cell phone cameras. And when they are challenged or accosted by the law enforcement, they stand up to them and they say, no, I'm doing my constitutional duty. I'm doing my constitutional right. I'm policing the police. I'm keeping you accountable. I do not answer questions. I do not answer to you. I do not give you my identification. I don't give you permission to question me or interrogate me. And I will file, once again, a civil rights action, 18 U.S.C. 241 and 42 U.S.C. 1985 for violating my rights. This also was done by the journalists who were stopped by the military 3 or 4 years ago. They were with the Blaze or the Blade or something like that. And they were falsely held because they were photographing a military installation, and the judge allowed them to be sued, and they won the case. So I think the weaponization of the courts, the weaponization of the FISA process is totally unconstitutional, should be thrown out. And it's precisely what Americans feared, that you would have rogue FBI and law enforcement people cobble together fake evidence, deceive a court into granting all sorts of investigations, and then in the course of the investigations naturally entrap the victims, the subjects, into false process crimes. Like, oh, you said you wore a red tie, but it was actually a yellow tie. So that's a violation of 18 U.S.C. 100-1, making a false statement to a government official. Therefore, we're going to file a 5-year imprisonment against you unless you tell on Mr. Trump and say that he watched kiddie porn or had bestiality activities or any of the above. And that's what they tried to do to Paul Manafort. That's what they tried to do with Roger Stone. Paul Manafort is another gift that keeps on giving because he was involved with the Ukraine situation, and that's what Obama weaponized, Ukraine against Manafort, to throw him in jail. And again, Roger Stone and Jerome Corsi, they all used an attempt to blackmail them to use against Donald Trump. Now, of course, Trump is going to pardon everyone, but he needs to allow it to run the full course in the process and expose all these practitioners in these positions, because they're, besides lawyers, Americans love to hate these rogue bully cops and law enforcement who are clearly, violating their rights. So I think Trump is playing this wise. He's on the side of the American people when he says this corrupt judge totally skewed the Stone case. And they need to do deep probing investigations of the backgrounds of these people. And again, make sure that every jurist swears an oath to the Constitution. If you're not prepared to do that, you're not participating in the legislative side or the judiciary side of government. Jim?
I think those are all very sensible remarks. I was fairly floored when in my trial for damages, the jury, 12 jurors, 2 men or 1 man and 11 women were all under 30, and they all professed they'd never even heard of Alex Jones. To me, that was very, very strange.
Yeah.
But, the idea that this was a jury of my peers never seemed to emerge whatsoever. And I was just, very, very much surprised.
Well, you're screwed, too.
Does that sound odd to you, Don?
No, that sounds all too American. And taking that oath, I mean, I think on their side, the oath is just a bunch of words that everybody has to take, and it doesn't really mean all that much. And you can see that in the practice. It's been going on for how many decades? It's just something else. So this corporate country has got a lot of mending to do and rebuilding and apologizing for, and the things are just not the way they're supposed to be. I'm sorry, folks.
I think you got that right, Don. Meanwhile, Attorney General Barr takes aim at sanctuary cities that ignore federal immigration laws. It's about time, some would say. The DOJ is cracking down on any jurisdiction refusing to cooperate with federal immigration law. It's about time. The so-called sanctuary advocates claim it's compassionate to ignore the unlawful immigration activity of individuals and conceal that knowledge from immigration and customs enforcement agents. The sanctuary status also is a thumb in the eye of the legal immigrants who don't take the risk of walking across the border, but instead follow the rules. The Department of Justice under Bill Barr is filing lawsuits against sanctuary cities, counties, and states who flout federal immigration law. I like it. They filed several lawsuits already against the state of California, the California governor, and the California attorney general over the prohibition of private operation of detention facilities. The state of New Jersey governor, New Jersey attorney general for prohibiting state officials from sharing information with ICE officials. King County, Washington, and King County executive for prohibiting U.S. Customs Enforcement and their contractors from using the King County International Airport.
That's right
Attorney
here.
General William Barr announced Monday there will be a significant escalation from the government against sanctuary cities, counties, and states, including lawsuits against localities opposed to the Trump administration's hardline immigration policies. The administration is attempting to crack down on local and state governments that have pledged to protect undocumented immigrants from deportation. Barr announced lawsuits against the state of New Jersey and King County, Washington, which includes Seattle.
Yep.
Unfortunately, in various jurisdictions, so-called progressive politicians are jeopardizing the public safety by putting the interests of criminal aliens before those of law-abiding citizens, Barr said. These policies are textbook examples of misguided ideology trumping over common sense law enforcement. I am very disturbed by this practice. Meanwhile, on the other part of the country, Virginia House passes draconian assault weapons ban. The House of Representatives in the state of Virginia is quickly ramming liberal legislation down the throats of innocent people. They have passed an assault weapons ban, which would criminalize thousands of people who haven't committed a crime. On Tuesday, Democrats continued their quest to disarm the civilians and advocate for a series of gun control measures in what has become the epicenter of the nationwide gun debate, may I say. Michael Bloomberg financed all of this. He sought to buy the legislatures of 16 states. He succeeded in 14, most notably in Virginia, by putting in place zealous gun grabbers to do his bidding, where he wants to make gun control the centerpiece of his presidential campaign, but it's not going to pan out. I mean, this is a complete disaster. And we know, of course, that many of the counties in Virginia have declared themselves to be Second Amendment sanctuary counties. Just to elaborate on the difference, they have taken a page from the liberal playbook, but whereas the cities in California that are declaring themselves to be sanctuaries from the enforcement of immigration laws, they are actually sabotaging the Constitution and the rule of law, whereas in Virginia, the counties are standing up for the Second Amendment and the Constitution. They are upholding the law. The situation could not be more opposite. The 51-48 vote in the House of Delegates moves House Bill 961, the assault weapons ban, to the state Senate. Passage among senators could be in jeopardy, however, as Democrats have only a 2-seat majority, meaning they can only afford to lose one vote should all the Republicans oppose the bill. But don't assume its passage won't happen. Taking away guns is essential to tyranny. The propaganda is all about safety. This legislation, like other bills passed by the House this year, is intended to make Virginia safer every day,
Yeah.
House Democrats said in this statement. But that flies in the face of the facts of the matter. Everyone who resides in the rural counties knows how farmers are going to be at the mercy of roving gangs who are out to pillage, rape, and rob if they can't defend themselves. The idea of taking weapons away from law-abiding citizens is stark, raving mad. I think a case could be made that those who are promoting gun confiscation are indeed mentally ill, just as the earlier studies, albeit unscientific, were suggestive of being the case. Not only that, but we know that law-abiding Americans use guns for defensive purposes between 0.5 and 3 million times every single year. and that they are estimated to save over 200,000 lives every single year. If you put together all the alleged deaths from the fake shooting like Sandy Hook, 26, Parkland, 17, Orlando, 50, you don't get up to 200. We're talking about 200,000 real Americans,
Yep.
not fake numbers made up to promote gun control. We also know worldwide demographics show that gun ownership and homicide rates are inversely related. The more guns owned, the lower the homicide rate. In North America, Canada, the United States, gun ownership among the highest in the world, also the lowest homicide rate. South America, take Brazil, low gun ownership, high homicide rate. Africa, low gun ownership, high homicide rate. Russia, low gun ownership, high homicide rate. When they banned guns in London, the homicide rate went up. They had an epidemic of knife attacks.
Yeah.
So they banned knives. I said, what are they going to do next? Ban potato peelers? That's exactly what they did. Ludicrous. And why would a nation with over 100 million armed Americans forfeit the contribution they make to the nation's security, which was very evident on the eve of World War II when Emperor Hirohito contemplated invading the United States and was advised by his highest ranking military it would be a mistake because there'd be a sniper behind every blade of grass. How are we going to support ourselves, defend ourselves against an invasion of Chinese, for example? Not such a far-fetched example. If we take guns away from law-abiding Americans, it is lunatic. Anyone can look at Chicago, which has the most stringent gun control laws in the nation, and recognize it's not working. Because not only do they have the most stringent gun control laws, they have the highest gun violence. So the Democrats are leading us down a primrose path to disaster. This is to make tyrants safer against those they want to control over. This is obvious to anyone who has even the slightest knowledge of history. Virginia has become ground zero in the national gun debate as Democrats have made gun control the cornerstone of this year's legislative season after capturing a full majority for the first time in 2 decades, thanks to Michael Bloomberg. Fully prepping for tyranny is difficult because it takes on relying on history for evidence of just how far humans will go to enforce laws on those who haven't done anything wrong. But if the Soviet Union and Nazi Germany are any gauge, Virginians could be in big trouble. Dave Hodges on the Common Sense Show has emphasized how during the 20th century, 19 societies suffered from democide, the slaughter of the whole society, which was followed after gun confiscation. We can't let America become number 20. Here's a brilliant book by John W. Whitehead of the Rutherford Institute. Understanding that the police state is here and that there will be humans willing to enforce these laws is the first step. Constitutional attorney John W. Whitehead has written a powerful book about the police state we're living in here in the USA. Battlefield America, the War on the American People details how our towns and cities have become battlefields. And we, the American people, are now the enemy combatants of the government to be spied upon, tracked, frisked, searched. For those who resist, the consequences can be a one-way trip to jail or even death. Battlefield America, the War on the American People is a terrifying portrait of a nation at war with itself. In exchange for safe schools and lower crime rates, we have opened the doors to militarized police, zero-tolerance policies in schools, and SWAT team raids. The insidious shift was so subtle that most of us had no idea it was happening. This follow-up to Whitehead's award-winning A Government of Wolves is a brutal critique of an America on the verge of destroying the very freedoms that defined it. Hands up, the police state has arrived. Brilliant piece of work.
Yeah.
Scott,
No, can I interject something myself
absolutely.
here? Okay, I got a little update here. I think you'll find this to be a relief from what all you've seen in the past here in this last sequence here. I'm going to share this with you here. The Democratic Governor Ralph Northam suffers an embarrassing loss as assault weapons bans is rejected in Virginia. The Democratic loss seems that
This is wonderful. Do we have the vote? Can we read more, Don? Can you open the whole article? This is fascinating.
Yeah, this just happened today. Came in today as we were on air here.
Don, the timing is exquisite. We're just talking about the issue, and there it is.
There it is, yeah. So
a huge win for the Second Amendment. Scroll down further, Don, and I'll read parts of it. Virginia Democrat Governor Ralph Northam's all-in push to ban the sale of assault weapons was rejected in the state Senate after moderate Democrats joined Republican colleagues to sink the initiative Monday. That's today. Cheers erupted in the committee room packed with gun supporters. The senators voted to put the bill on hold for a year so the state's crime commission could study the issue. 4 Democrats decided to vote with Republicans. Remember, they only had a 2-seat majority, rejecting legislation that aimed to outlaw new sales of some semi-automatic firearms such as the AR-15 and require current owners of such firearms to register with the government within the year. The bill would also have criminalized the possession of magazines that hold more than 12 rounds. The bill's rejection is an embarrassing loss for Northam and Democrats in Virginia, who aim to use their narrow and newfound majority to push a broad progressive gun control agenda on the state. This is sensational, Don.
Yeah.
Great catch. I am thrilled. And I know Scott shares my ecstasy over this development. This is just wonderful, Don. What a great catch.
I do share your ecstasy, Jim, in the celebration of the Second Amendment, which the Founding Fathers recognized as a God-given right, not a government-given right, but a God-given right to defend against the tyranny of government, police, and military tyranny over people. They exercised it against Great Britain, and they enshrined it in the Constitution so that the right to keep and bear arms, keep, meaning in your house, keep in your car, and bear on your person shall not be infringed. In other words, shall not be stopped, licensed, impeded, restrained, suspended in any way, shape, or form, unless by a jury of their peers for a crime, which is the entry of government intervention in life if you've committed a crime. So I think we're witnessing a return to the Second Amendment. And also the casting off. It's ironic that Whitehead book, Battle for the Police State in America. I didn't read the slides ahead of time, so I'm fascinating that I was saying just the very same thing. And here, it appears that America has been assaulted, abused, enslaved, tormented, and terrorized by the police and the law enforcement agencies and the Department of Justice. And it goes, for a long ways back. You can look at Ruby Ridge and the FBI's assassination of Randy Weaver's wife and all that other jazz, and the tyranny of the Democrats against the Branch Davidians in Texas. All of these were reasons why the American people have guns to defend themselves. And you're seeing people, again, on video, on YouTube, challenging the police when they're stopped, not rolling down their window, showing a document or stating a document. I do not answer questions. I do not give you the right to question me. I do not recognize your investigation. Am I committed a crime? Am I being detained? Then I have nothing to say to you and I'm moving on. And police, some of them get stupid and act out of order, but some of them recognize and say, hey, go have a nice day. And that's what freedom's all about, are people rising up, claiming their rights and affirming them and not backing down. And there are, again, how many police are good and bad? Sadly, I think the majority of them are bullies and tyrants and fools. And it's brought out when you see the videos of police putting fake blood on their arms. Remember that video of a shooting up in Virginia?
Yeah.
That's fake. That instantly puts every policeman, his head in the crosshairs of some conservative traditional rights, and some of them aren't all there. Some of them are pretty violent, and paranoid. But when the police act that way, every police officer is a suspect. And I don't like that, but they are doing it, pouring fake blood on themselves, pretending there's a shooting. There was another guy in California who pretended he was shot, and he was a deputy or something, and they found out he was lying about that. These are the things that revolutions are triggered by, when people have no faith in law enforcement or government and they act out to preserve their own. So I think we're moving in that direction, because the police may act out of order. They may act with tyranny, and they will be the ones who will lose. The American people, whether it's by crossbows or bow and arrows or swords or stars or slings with, the metal ball bearings, the police are fighting a guerrilla war, and they will not win that. And I think Virginia is a testimony to that, testimony of Virginians that started the Civil War, if you will, or one of the parts of it. They're returning to the confirmation. Now, if the governor files an executive order to suspend that, which he could do, then we might see the impeachment for crimes against the Constitution and things like that, which we should. But I think you're also going to see the 98% of the counties in West Virginia or Virginia join West Virginia. There's already talk about that, and that can be a political reality where the counties are moved to West Virginia. They recognize the changing of the state. And I think the way to combat that, of course, is to elect sheriffs, new sheriffs that will declare their county a pro-Second Amendment sanctuary county, that no laws, state or federal, shall be allowed to be applied. And the sheriffs are the way to do that. The sheriff is the most powerful person in America, because they are the sole law enforcement representative of the people that are voted into the county to defend the people in the county, and to deputize everybody in the county, and to give everybody the right to keep and bear arms by the sheriff's decree. That's how to fight tyranny, is to elect new sheriffs that will do that. Jim?
Yeah, wonderful. What a great day for the USA. I'm just thrilled beyond belief.
That's good.
And it's going to have a lot of consequences. This is going to have ramifications for the entire campaign of 2020 and who becomes elected president. I'm very impressed. Don, your timing was exquisite.
It just came in this half hour ago.
Yeah. We'll call it circumstantial. It was just perfect timing. Now, here's a wonderful interview with the Tehran Times with Robert David Steele, who's a very formidable intellect. The guy's former CIA. He's a whistleblower. He believes in open source intelligence. He was the leading reviewer of books for Amazon. He reviewed over 2,000, closer to 2,500 nonfiction books for Amazon, which he pulled because Amazon's practices in censoring books and publications as a form of protest. Here's a very, very interesting interview he did with about a counterintelligence perspective on the Wuhan virus, a Zionist biowar false flag attack, Tehran Times. Here's the first question put to Robert David Steele, a former Marine Corps infantry officer and CIA spy, as well as an activist for open source everything engineering, contributes regularly to the Tehran Times. Question. You have been following the Wuhan virus since 26 January 2020. Originally, you declared it a natural outbreak less virulent than SARS, but then you revised your view as new information became available. On 1 February, an element of the Chinese military formally accused the US of launching this virus against them as an act of war, and Russian websites are repeating this accusation. What is your overall appraisal of the Wuhan virus and its implication for both China-US relations and the overall global economy? Answer, Robert Steele. Of course, we need better source and more reflection and analysis. I consider much of the hysterical reporting allegedly from China to be deliberate misinformation. Let me start my appraisal by saying that the newest information available suggests that this was a Zionist attack on China in two parts. In part one, a Jewish American professor at Harvard appears to have been dangled to the Chinese, committed treason against the USA, and assisted the Chinese in establishing a level 4 biowar center in Wuhan. In part two, and the professor could be unwitting of this part, the Zionists released the virus in both the marketplace and in the hospitals. 41% of the infections occurred in the hospitals, not in the street. It should not be assumed that the virus escaped from a Chinese facility or by accident.
Right.
It's not yet clear to me if this Zionist provocation was intended to start a war between China and the U.S., as Benjamin Fulford suggests in his reporting from Japan on Monday, 10 February, or if it had other purposes, including massive economic gain by Zionist Anglo-American elites with advanced knowledge used to do insider trading and achieve great profits based on foreknowledge of both the Wuhan virus and the degree to which the Western media would exaggerate the crisis. It's also not clear to me the degree to which 5G, for which China is the lead country, intersects with a biological virus. 5G is a huge part of this. What we do not know yet is whether this was a false flag attack, as I suspect. A test of the intersection of biowarfare and electromagnetic warfare, or a full-out assault intended to destroy the Chinese economy and begin depopulating China, or all three.
Yeah.
And I mentioned, by the way, that the damage done by 5G is humongous, and it includes weakening your immune system, which means that diseases that you ordinarily cope with effortlessly can become major hazards to your health. Another question. Most media sources, including individuals that you yourself trust, say that this was not an act of war. It was rooted in filthy Chinese markets and filthy Chinese habits in relation to mixing and eating strange animals. What basis do you have for concluding it was an act of war? Answer, Robert Steele. You ask an important question. Let me first say that I think that this virus was deliberately weak and not intended to be catastrophic. It was a combination of a probe to see how China would handle a maliciously introduced virus. Remember that we have micro drones that can deliver viruses anywhere without any chance of their being intercepted, and a massive psychological economic warfare operation in which the media destroyed the Chinese economy using the virus as a hook. The media, not the virus, is what caused economic havoc. Belatedly, Chinese overreaction and the hurting of citizens and depends has made the situation somewhat worse. Secondly, the code for the virus has been published and the introduced mutations documented. Some of the documentation, for example, the Indian paper suggesting HIV was introduced, has been discounted subsequently, but there's no question that the Wuhan virus was lab engineered.
That's
Although
right.
the Chinese themselves affirmed that the virus first jumped from animals to humans inside the Hunan seafood wholesale market in the heart of the city, I now consider this questionable and believe the Chinese themselves were afraid of public outrage if it became known that the virus was bioengineered with the Wuhan Institute of Virology, a level 4 biowarfare facility, as the obvious suspect. I have no direct knowledge, but I will say I believe that the Zionists in power in the U.S., including our Christian Zionist Secretary of State, who thinks it's a wonderful thing for the CIA to lie, cheat, and steal, want a war with Iran and understand that Russia and China have the power to stop such a war. Let me mention in passing here, this may also have been engineered to divert China from developing the new Silk Road with Iran that's going to make a major change to the economy of the world on a profound scale, which the Zionists are absolutely dedicated to undermining.
Right.
What they do not understand is that the U.S. military is unsustainable in any major war against a pure opponent and completely vulnerable to both biological and electromagnetic attack from the rear area headquarters to the front lines. And frankly, even if they understood our deficiencies, I don't think they care. Their lust for war, their ideological blindness is such that they should all be found unfit for public service and isolated.
How about
the
that?
FBI has been totally worthless as a national counterintelligence agency. So yes, there is an Iran connection. This virus and the Western media hysteria have temporarily consumed China and its leadership and its military. The Russians, however, do not have this problem, in part because they are far advanced in energetic scalar, time energy, and gravitobiology, all of which can neutralize any biological attack, such as occurred in China. it would be useful for Iran to sponsor a conference on the Wuhan virus and invite the Russians to brief, even if only to select a few and secretly, on their views of the intersection between biology and energy. Meanwhile, another report, why are children missing from coronavirus outbreak cases? So far, it seems that youth protects against the worst effects of 219-nCoV. The outbreak of a new coronavirus in China has killed more than 900 people, but one group has escaped with minimal damage, children. You can certainly contract the virus. Among the infected are at least 2 newborns, according to Chinese health officials, but few children are among those sick enough to be diagnosed with a coronavirus, according to an article published February 5th in the Journal of the American Medical Association. According to the data analyzed in that article, and numbers are changing quickly as the outbreak evolves, the median age of patients skews older, between 49 and 56 years old. Let me add, by the way, one further thought here, which is that it's also possible that China is using the coronavirus to cull the herd, to take political dissidents that are undesirable from the point of view of the Chinese Communist Party, to isolate and exclude them from society, as has been done intermittently in the past. Scott, your thought?
Real quickly, it's not only the coronavirus that was developed in Wuhan province, but also Wuhan province was the first province to go wide on 5G. They put 5G in October, and that gives you, if you are exposed to much 5G, it gives you symptoms of a cold and flu and things very similar to the coronavirus. But the 5G can be a directed energy weapon that can be used to kill people, and they can blame it on the coronavirus.
You are correct, Don. Scott,
I'm sorry about that.
Well, it looks like our trip to Hong Kong was successful. This was a psychological warfare operation. This is an economic warfare, biologically intermixed. I was on a Russian television interview. I'll share with you, Jim, maybe next week we can get it on, in which I talked about this. It's ironic that Robert David Steele came up with much of the same conclusions in his analysis. This, in one sense, China is the great threat to the United States. China is, again, a two-dimensional robotic Borg society, unclean in a lot of its habits, tyrannical and oppressive and abusive of its population and others, very racially apartheid inclined. They are disliked by the majority of the Asiatic nations and peoples. They do not like China for a variety of reasons. Its thousands of years of history has really not fundamentally changed its character or personality of the Chinese people. They are invading California. The Chinese Communist Party is invading and corrupting San Francisco, Northern California politics, and Southern California. When Amy Fan and I went to Hong Kong, among other things we were engaged with, it was exposing a lot of the Chinese Communist practices of introducing fentanyl drugs and human trafficking and sex trafficking, of course, into the ports of San Francisco, Oakland, and Long Beach. And the Chinese are a cannibalistic consuming mentality. They are a danger and a threat. And currently, the San Francisco public officer in the San Francisco government has just been indicted by a U.S. attorney for fraud and corruption. So it's fascinating because, of course, we were engaged in that months ago, and it's now being prosecuted by the feds. And he is linked to the Chinese Communist Party. London Breed, the mayor of San Francisco, which automatically also connects him to Nancy Pelosi, Dianne Feinstein, and a variety of other Democrat machine politicians in the Bay Area. So this is going to be part two, is the collapse of the California communist machine. And I'm all in favor of disintegrating and destroying Chinese capability of destroying the economic foundations of America. I'm all about doing whatever needs to be done to retard and restrain and stop the Chinese aggression against the United States and the West. And Trump's plan should be a full-on renaissance of our relationship with Russia, using Russia as a bridge to Iran, recognizing Iran is not a threat. I've been on the Tehran Times, and so have you, Jim. Iran is not a threat. Russia is not a threat. China is a threat. And of course, the Zionist Israelis are a threat.
Yep.
As we saw, they were engaged in 9/11. So all of these things need to be recalculated and repositioned on the geopolitical chessboard so that Donald Trump and President Putin effectively and efficiently manage a renewed relationship with the people of Iran. And they are ready to not westernize, but to absorb Western relationships and principles in exchange for, just being allowed to be Iranians, be conservative Muslims. But there's Jews and Christians in Iran too. It is not a fanatical society. So I think there's a whole change going on. China is going to implode. China is going to fall apart. I'd like to see the Chinese Communist Party completely wither and disintegrate, and break China up into regions. That will be the next phase. Is part 3 will be the breakup of China into regions, similar to European states. European nations, of course, are divided. Luxembourg, France, Germany, Italy, all of that needs to be the model for breaking up China into geographic, language, cultural regions. And the Uyghur will be the first region, I think, to break apart and break away. And we should encourage that. And we should do everything we can to facilitate that. Because, again, China is the enemy of everything that Americans stand for. And you have no further to look than San Francisco, the Bay Area. And look what they do to the Shenyun Falun Dafa. They cannibalize them. They cut their organs out. And they are also the reason Democrats buy them or support them is because they buy Democrat votes. So the Democrats and the Chinese Communist Party are the enemy of the American people, and they need to be exposed. Jim?
Yeah, I think that's all very, very good, Scott. Very appropriate. We're really entering a fascinating period in world history, actually, not just American. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, we have Switzerland stopping 5G. Medical Association concerned about cancer and damage to the nervous system. How sensational is this? Virtually on a par with the Virginia legislature dropping the gun control agenda. In 2017, doctors and scientists worldwide requested a 5G moratorium. In 2018, 5G was installed in some New York neighborhoods anyway, and residents and their pets immediately started experiencing symptoms from exposure. Some put their homes up for sale because of it. This was reported on social media by Dr. Naomi Wolf. People getting sick from 5G isn't exclusive to New York. Residents of Switzerland have been particularly vocal about their opposition, especially after being exposed. Now the country has stopped the use of all new towers. And that's one of the incredible features. You have to have one of these towers because the electromagnetic demands are so great, like every 500 yards. So if you're going to have these installed, the world's going to look like a porcupine. I mean, it's completely absurd. The aesthetics are just appalling, not to mention the damage to life and health. From the Financial Times, the country's environmental agency has called time on the use of all new towers. Sam Jones, Financial Times, February 12. Switzerland was among the first countries to begin deploying 5G, but health fears over radiation from the antennae that carry the next generation mobile technology have sparked a nationwide revolt.
Yep.
Switzerland, one of the world's leaders in the rollout of 5G mobile technology, has placed an indefinite moratorium on the use of its new network because of health concerns. The move comes as countries elsewhere around Europe race to upgrade their networks to 5G standard amid a furious rearguard diplomatic campaign by the U.S. to stop them from using Chinese technology provided by Huawei. Washington says the company, which is fundamental to most European networks upgrade plans, presents a grave security risk. Well, it's the product, not the source of the product, but the product itself that represents the great risk. Worldwide opposition to 5G continues to increase. The first global 5G opposition day was held in January. Cities and countries have taken action against 5G, even banning it. In December, doctors, scientists, engineers, public advocates asked President Trump for a moratorium on 5G because of biological, environmental, and safety risks. Multiple 5G lawsuits have also been filed in the U.S. I've been personally distraught that Trump seems so gung-ho on 5G.
Me too.
Telecom companies have still offered no scientific evidence that 5G is safe. Of course, all sources of cell phones and wireless Wi-Fi radiation, 1G through 4G, are also biologically, environmentally harmful. But this is an exponential increase in the damage potential here. Pollution from electromagnetic radiation is also a problem before 5G. Many experts have been insisting we should be drastically reducing sources of electrosmog, whereas the race for 5G does the exact opposite. It even includes blasting 5G at Earth from space with satellites.
Correct.
So imagine contriving these technological marvels to kill ourselves. It's insane.
Yep.
Meanwhile, the Senate has passed an Iran War Powers Resolution, which I commend. In a vote of 55 to 45, the Senate passed the Iran Wars Power Resolution on Thursday afternoon, setting out opposition to any unauthorized war with Iran, instructing the president not to deploy troops for such a war. Voting was heavily along party lines, with Democrats and some anti-war Republicans managing to pass the resolution in the face of mocking opposition from the Republican leadership, who insisted the resolution could never survive a Trump veto and was a sign of weakness against Iran. On the contrary, we are getting the reputation of being the bully of the world, the aggressor nation. This bringing war against Iran would be idiotic in the extreme, especially because it contradicts the policies on which Trump was elected to the presidency, to end the wars, to get out of the Middle East, not to add new ones. Right. Meanwhile, I was interviewed by Press TV on the assassination of Soleimani and in relation as well to these new moves to constrain Trump. And I explained how, in fact, both the assassination of Soleimani and the sanctions on Iran are war crimes, explaining the basis that, in fact, under the United Nations Charter, one nation is allowed to preemptory attack upon another only under two circumstances. First, with approval of the UN Security Council, which was not the case here. Or second, if there were an imminent threat requiring an immediate response, which is also not the case. We therefore violated the UN Charter, to which we are associated by a treaty. Under the Constitution, treaties have the same status under the law as the Constitution itself. Therefore, Trump, in launching this attack, violated the Constitution, which he'd taken an oath to protect, preserve, and defend. In addition, the sanctions on Iran are for a collective punishment that are forbidden by the third article of the Fourth Geneva Convention. This is international law. Trump imposing the sanctions is punishing the people of Iran collectively for the political decisions of their leaders. That is forbidden. That would be another bona fide article on which Trump could deserve to be impeached. The Democrats, however, forfeited their opportunity with their meaningless efforts in relation to the phone call to the president of Ukraine. Ridiculous. Yet a third possible article would be Trump's expansion of the definition of anti-Semitism by means of an executive order to include criticism of the government of Israel, the actions of the government of Israel in blatant violation of the First Amendment. So I was explaining and laying out here for the benefit of the Iranian people where the situation really stands, not with any expectation, of course, any action would actually be taken against the president, but rather how, from the point of view of international law, he has committed serious violations that are indeed deservedly viewed as impeachable offenses. Meanwhile, U.S. officials feel challenged by Russia in northeast Syria. The 500 U.S. ground troops that remain in Syria, according to President Trump, purely to control the oil, are finding themselves less and less welcome in Syria's northeast, and officials are presenting Russia as posing a constant set of challenges. They appear to be largely of America's own making, with troops going on patrol into the area, finding themselves have run-ins with Russian troops. The Pentagon says Russia is violating a pledge to keep U.S. and Russian troops apart. But with Trump arguing the U.S. is only there for the oil, it's not clear that there's a reason for the U.S. troops to go on walkabouts in the Turkish-controlled border region where Russian troops are known to be. Meanwhile, the Pentagon has offered Iraq a partial military pullout. In January, the Iraqi parliament voted 170-0 for the government to seek a full pullout of all foreign troops. President Trump reacted with threats. And while Iraq's former PM had backed away, the matter of the U.S. president is still an issue. Weeks later, things may be changing. Over the past week, the Pentagon has talked to senior Iraqi officials, telling them they are prepared to discuss withdrawal in some form. The U.S. has even offered a plan for a partial pullback of troops from some parts of Iraq, which would be a most welcome development. Scott, your thoughts on all of the above?
Well, where is the congressional hearing on 5G? They are utter despotic fools and idiots that should be impeached because they're not addressing the number one health challenge and danger to the United States and the total unconstitutional action by these cell tower companies putting up 5G because it destroys the principle of the Constitution, which is to preserve life, liberty, property, and the pursuit of happiness. Destroying the body destroys that, so it's unconstitutional, and people should file federal action on that basis against their states and their town councils that put up these towers. It's very simple, but there should be a congressional hearing on this. And
I just want to say that who cares about life and health when you have speed? You can get speed on these things. That's what's important, right, man?
Well, the anti-war resolution is a good thing. I think Trump should embrace that and not veto it, perhaps. Or, I can understand him vetoing it for his own power because he's in election mode too. Remember, in a similar way, George Bush had to engage in healthcare reforms because the Democrats were weaponizing it politically against him. Trump has to embrace 5G politically speaking. That doesn't mean he has to do it materially or infrastructurally, but politically and psychologically and communicatively, he does have to embrace 5G as a technology bridge, even though it is not that. So it can't be weaponized against him by fools who see it alternatively. But the anti-war resolution 5G, these things are being played against Trump. The 9/11 Patriot Act was what metastasized us into this police state war industrial complex. So, that's part of the other thing that Trump is dealing with. Syria is going to be a Vietnam for the United States. So Trump has got to get out by summer so he can play it in September. But he has to give orders, and perhaps, he can begin to use it between now and summertime to make deals with Syria, deals with Iran, deals with Russia, and then say, we're going to pull out over the summertime so that everybody's not paying attention. And then, bam, in September, he says, we're all out of Syria, folks. It's all done. We're not getting into any more wars. Then suddenly he becomes once again the person who said, we're not going to go to war with Russia or China or anyone else or Iran. He needs to do that so he can pull the troops out over the summertime. And the Soleimani situation, you did a great interview, Jim. I read it. I agree 100%. Tulsi Gabbard also has called the assassination of Soleimani a war crime. I enjoyed seeing the kid Waters, that arrogant little putz on Fox News, say, you thought it was an assassination? It was an assassination. And Tulsi Gabbard said it too. And it was a war crime. And again, this was a lure. This is an act of treason. This is false intelligence that's being given to the president as 5G. Trump is surrounded by idiots and no one really good at all. Reince Priebus was a traitor. I sent him shell game and Mitt Romney shell game in 2012 before Obama in September, and he did nothing. So Mitt Romney and Reince Priebus should be prosecuted as part of the rest that are going to be. H.R. McMaster, I think it was Jim, H.R. McMaster, correct me if I'm wrong, but he was the one who hired Ciaramella, brought him back into. Ciaramella is the whistleblower. Yes. Let me say it again, since no one in Congress has the balls to say it. Ciaramella is the whistleblower leaker. He's a traitor. He should be prosecuted as such. But Trump's guy, H.R. McMaster, brought him in. And, the other thing, Reince Priebus, it's Jeff Sessions stabbed Trump in the back, who allowed this whole false Ukraine-Russia hoax thing. Yes. Trump is surrounded by bad people. So he's
Yep.
got to bring in some varsity player, real conservatives like us, and he'll have a more successful political career and family situation and international relationship with other nations. Since
Agreed,
we're doing
100%.
more diplomacy with Iran, Jim, you and I, than anyone in his entire government. So let us continue that.
I agree. Go for it.
Meanwhile, Citizens for Free Speech is making an effort to stand up for the American people. Whoever would overthrow the liberty of a nation was begin by subduing the freeness of speech, said Benjamin Franklin. Here's a woman who's leading the effort by Citizens for Free Speech, which I highly recommend. Check it out. There are several projects in which they are engaged, which include local activism, creating social media platforms, media coalitions, intensive training for citizen stakeholders. They have a join platform. Check it out, CFFS, on the internet. I highly encourage joining. Meanwhile, I had a second interview with Rebecca Carnes on Friday from Newtown. She is sensational. This is one of the most enjoyable interviews I ever have done in all my history on radio. And Dan Erber, who has an extensive background in the military and law enforcement, is taking a critical look at the Sandy Hook Elementary shooting and all the failures of law enforcement, which grossly, reinforce Rebecca's petition about the failures of law enforcement and suggests why it's having so many signees. We've had over 300 signers by today, maybe over 400. The opinion by Dan Erber, I added the following note. During our sensational interview on Valentine's Day, which I embedded, by the way, in this blog at jamesfetzer.org, Rebecca Carnes made reference to something discovered by Dan Erber in this searching review of the inadequate response of local and state law enforcement agencies to the alleged mass shooting at Sandy Hook Elementary School, 14 December 2012, which reinforces the conclusion of serious scholars of this event that it was a FEMA mass casualty exercise involving children promoted as mass murder to promote the Obama administration gun control agenda. Check it out. This is really important stuff. And I tell you, I feel as though we're making real headway in getting the truth out about Sandy Hook. Don.
Yeah. Oh, yes. I'll say that we really are doing very tremendous work here on Truth versus News. It's really a blessing to have these gentlemen, these scholars, these intelligence men at our behest. So I hope you all out there are appreciating this and sharing this show. And Scott, you're just wonderful. And I will say, with Sandy Hook and Virginia coming around and things, I think we're breaking through here, and we'll see what's going to happen in this election. I'd say the worst thing we could have is that little guy Michael in there. But,
we're punching the deep state like Rocky Balboa punching that side of cow in the meat locker, and we're going to take down YouTube, Facebook, Google through their New Zealand shooting false flag that we exposed, and they shut down our websites because they had conspired in that fake shooting. So we're taking them all down like Godzilla stomping on Japan.
Yeah, that's right.
Take us out, Don.
I gotta take us out. That was my timer going off. Anyway, so thank you so much for watching today on Truth versus News, February 17th, President's Day. What a patriotic day to have a show there, and so I really thank you all for watching. God bless you, gentlemen, and we'll see you next week.